Yeah, oh, there's, okay, I'll just do that one. This is interesting. Hello and welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. It's just me this week, just boring old Bobby Lou. Very sorry about that. Now, yes, because there is a reason for this. It isn't just a haphazard event. I spent quite a long time the other day recording a podcast with an amazing man. And it was a really interesting conversation. And it lasted over an hour and it was fascinating. And I actually learnt stuff. I've forgotten it now, obviously, but at the time I learnt it. And that was brilliant. And then I only recorded one side of it. Hello. Numpty. So, without any question, it is Bobby made a boo-boo. Oh, yes, Bobby made a boo-boo. And that's all right. Yes, I'm very sorry. I completely screwed it up. Well, we're using a lot of different technology that we've not been using before. Zoom. We've been Zooming. I've done a lot of Zoom conferences and Zoom calls. Been Zooming all over the place. Everyone's Zooming. Yeah, I don't think I'd even heard of Zoom 4 or 5 weeks ago. Now everybody's using it. It's extraordinary. Anyway, I really stuffed that up. So I am re-recording that interview and that podcast next week, along with 3 other podcast interviews. I'll tell you about one because I'm really excited about it. Lovely Dan Snow. Now, people outside the UK may not know of Dan. He is an amazing man, a historian. I did a BBC programme with him about 3 or 4 years ago about the Mumbai Railway. Dan and I spent... And I've ignored one of the presenters, the very wonderful Anita Rani. So there were 3 of us, Dan Snow, Anita Rani, and myself, going on trains in Mumbai in India. It was absolutely amazing. And I learnt to drive a train, which was slightly alarming because my driving instructor was ringing his wife and giving her getting a shopping list. She was telling him what to buy on his way home, as we were rattling down a train line in a train that weighs about 70 or 80 tons, that's all. And there was a cow on the line, and you really don't want to run over a cow in India. It's just not a good idea. You don't want to run over a cow full stop anywhere, but particularly in India. And I didn't really know where the brakes were. Anyway, the cow survived, and so did I, and the man went off and got his shopping on the way home that day in Bhusawal in central India. Amazing time. So I was there with Dan Snow, and Dan and I have arranged to record a podcast about we're looking at the history not only of electric vehicles but of the oil industry as well. So I'm very excited to be doing that with Dan. Obviously we'll be miles apart. He's at his house, I'm at mine, everyone's at their house. And then if you get it wrong, like I did last week, I'm just going to say to Amrit, in case he's listening to this, I'm very sorry, and we'll do it again. Oh God, it's so annoying. It was one button. I just didn't know it was there. Anyway, as regards news about electric cars, well, I'm sure you can imagine, because of the thing, I don't want to talk about it, the thing, you all know what I'm talking about, there is not a great deal of news. For a start, I'm supposed to have had 2 electric cars delivered and picked up from my house in the last 10 days or so. I've got one of them. Lovely, the Renault Zoe, which we did a review of recently, which is fabulous. That's still here. No one's going to come and pick it up. I've got it for months. Who knows? A long time. Not really using it that much, to be honest, because you can't go anywhere. And I'm not going to go anywhere except down the shop, which I've only done once since the lockdown. I'm not talking about the thing. I will not talk about the thing. But there was a bit of news. Something caught my eye. I was pleased to discover that Poland, of all countries, counted 9,803 electric cars and plug-in hybrids at the end of February, including 5,700 fully electric vehicles in Poland. You don't think of Poland as being an electric car country, but it is. And the sales are off the scale. 1,166 pure battery electric vehicles were added in January and February alone, which is 181% more than in the same period last year. Now, it is important to point out, and I'm sure many of you have already started tapping out comments, But Poland produces some of the dirtiest electricity in Europe. So the benefits of driving an EV are mainly cost-based in Europe. But saying they're cost-based is a snooty way of saying it's cheaper to drive an electric car than a fossil burner, which it is. But if they have oil refining capabilities in Poland, which I assume they probably do, they're a very advanced industrial country, I would imagine they are refining their own oil, then the electricity they use to refine that oil, like in this country, is very, very dirty. And we need to take that into consideration when we consider the entire impact, the carbon footprint, and the particulate impact of burning fossil fuels. Because it's not just what comes out of the tailpipe. I've been saying this non-stop for the last 10 years. It is boring, but it's also true. But here's the important thing. I mean, their electricity, yes, Poland's electricity is filthy. It's literally, as you plug something in Poland, it coughs. Yeah, that's how dirty it is. Because they produce so much of their electricity by burning coal. We used to burn Polish coal in this country. We used to import coal from Poland, not Pole from Coland. We could call Poland coal land, couldn't we, if we were being rude about them? But the Polish people are amazing people. I'm not going to say anything bad about Poles. They are amazing people. All the Polish people I've met here, and they have been many, and they've all been amazingly well-educated, lovely, kind, thoughtful, generous, hard-working, honest, decent people. I'm just saying that, and I wish they could stay. Well, they will stay, some of them. Anyway, I'm not talking about that because I'm not talking about that thing. That's the old thing that we don't talk about, the B word, and the new thing. Not talking about either of those. But their electricity is filthy. Really, Poland, in 2020, is that a good idea to burn coal? Come on, get on the programme, will you? But the important thing is, if Poland does clean up its act as regards burning coal, which I think they will do, if they were to install more and more renewables, which they are doing, they do have wind farms in Poland, then the electric car that you're driving in Poland gets cleaner by default. That's the thing about electric cars. They are fuel agnostic. They don't care where the electricity comes from. They'll still work. They can use electricity generated by any source, and it's just as good as anything else. Now, contrary to fossil burners, there's no such thing as clean diesel or clean petrol. I know it's boring, and I know I say it all the time, but it's a message that can easily be forgotten. If someone says that their diesel or petrol car is cleaner than your electric car, offer them a kind, gentle, non-aggressive test that you drive both your vehicles into sealed containers, and you sit in one sealed container with your electric vehicle running for, let's say, for half an hour, for 30 minutes. With the engine running, with the, everything's on, with the engine on, everything's working, and they sit in their sealed container in their diesel car with the engine running. And then when the experiment is finished, you can both get out and have a chat, except it'll only be you who gets out. Let's leave it at that. But a recent joint report from the universities of Exeter, Nijmegen in the Netherlands and Cambridge has concluded that electric cars lead to lower carbon emissions overall, even if electricity generation still relies on fossil fuels. Now, this was an article in a magazine, and I'm going to have to quickly look it up because I've forgotten what it was. It wasn't in a magazine. It's from the University of Cambridge. I will put all the links to these stories in the show notes of this particular, this particular. I'm just sorry. That is a bit of an error on my part. I hadn't updated my bullet points to include that link, but I've got it now. So the links to these stories will be in there. But anyway, so. This is a report which is in there, which is, I wonder what it is. Is it the University of Cambridge? Oh, yeah. Cambridge University, research/news/electric cars are better for the climate in 95% of the world. Okay, so there we go. That's the webpage. So in 95% of the world, I think that's great. The study looked at what the impact that electric cars have in their total, consumption of energy and how they use it and all that stuff. They're about. And so for 95% of the world at the moment, it's a really good idea to have an electric car. It doesn't matter where you are. And probably the 5% that isn't good is probably Poland, where electric car sales are going through the roof. I still say it's better that they're having electric cars in Poland. Because you've got to, I don't think all these researchers, when they do the comparisons, it always makes me worry that they just do tailpipe emissions. They compare it to tailpipe emissions, which is a con job, a lie, a trick. They're foisting us off with nonsense. There is more impact from using fossil fuels in an internal combustion engine than the gases that come out of the tailpipe, the exhaust pipe as we call it. So I always question any of these things. But the average lifetime emissions from electric cars are up to 70% lower than petrol cars in countries like Sweden and France, which obviously get most of their electricity from renewables and nuclear, and around 30% lower in the UK, where we do still burn a lot of gas. Much less coal, that's down around 1 or 2%. Today it will be 0. I just checked because it's a windy and sunny day. So that is very important. And I think it's not just cars. You see, I'm always saying this. It's not just cars. Fully charged has never been about just cars. The study also looked at electric household heat pumps and found they too produce lower emissions than fossil fuel alternatives in 95% of the world. That's quite a high percentage. Heat pumps could reduce global CO2 emissions in 2050 by up to 0.8 gigatons per year, which is roughly equal to Germany's current annual emissions. And even though Germany's got a lot of renewables, they do burn a lot of coal. Really, Germany, in 2020? Come on. The idea that, now this is a quote from Dr. Florian Knobloch. I'm sure that's how you say it. He's from the University of Nijmegen in the Netherlands. He said the idea that electric vehicles or electric heat pumps could increase emissions is essentially a myth. Thank you, Dr. Knobloch. We've seen a lot of discussions about this recently with lots of disinformation going around. Here is a definitive study that can dispel those myths. We have run the numbers for all around the world, looking at a whole range of cars and heating systems. So there we go. That's marvellous. So driving an electric car is cleaner, and when people claim otherwise, they are simply wrong. So, like you all, pretty much all over the globe, unless you're in China, I'm entering my second week of isolation, and yes, going a little stir crazy, as I'm sure we all are. It's incredibly weird time, and I'm trying to send out positive and uplifting stories because I don't want to talk about the thing. If not 100% positive, at least not about the thing, not directly. So I let out a little whoop yesterday when the Fully Charged show on YouTube passed 90 million views. I mean, for me, an old bloke who's been working in telly for the last 40 years, that is amazing that Fully Charged on YouTube has had 90 million views. I'm sorry, just let me relish that for a moment. In a few months, we should pass 100 million views, and I will then crack open a bottle of urine recyc from the bunker storage and share a virtual glass with the team. Woo! We'll all be on Zoom, and I'll be doing it wrong and not recording it anyway. But then something struck me, 90 million views. That's hundreds of millions of megabytes that have flowed through the interwebs, massive network of server farms, cables and routers. And all that activity to run that requires electricity, a lot of electricity. And the one thing that we were due to film around this time was a visit to a massive data farm, a big data facility that's powered to close to 100%. Most of its power is coming from renewable electricity. And so we know that the likes of, obviously we're not filming that because we can't go out, but that one day we will, because I think it's a fascinating topic and it's very, very hidden. We don't think about it when we're downloading movies. Anyway, we know the likes of Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook have tended to site server farms near to sources of renewables. You may not know that, but they do. They go all around the world going, well, where's the electricity come from and how close can we get to it? Can we build a massive server farm here? I mean, they're talking about building server farms under the sea because that's an easier way to keep them cool. One of the biggest problems they have is cooling them because it's basically millions of computers in one massive building going... I mean, I've seen in one of them, they are mind-boggling. Couldn't even see the other end of the building inside. It just went into infinity and beyond. It was amazing. So the question you can ask yourself, is this because they are so altruistic and aware, these companies, the Googles and the Apples and the Amazons and the Facebooks? I mean, they're so woke. I do hate that term. They're so hyper aware. of how important it is to support the renewable industry that they've decided to only use renewable. No, that isn't why they're doing it. They site these installations near these places because it's cheaper. That is a simple explanation. That's the only reason. Electricity coming from renewables is cheaper than burning fossil fuels. Do they use batteries and other forms of storage, all kinds of storage, so they can run their server farms 24/7? Yes, they do. And that's why I wanted to go and see it. I wanted to see how that operates. Because we just never think of this stuff. I mean, I don't. I watch YouTube. I upload to YouTube. I rely on YouTube with barely a second thought. But the amount of power being used by these systems is eye-watering. I mean, if there's one thing we're all aware of, it's the massive rise, particularly recently, since the thing, in streaming video around the whole world. I know I've upped the amount of streaming TV I've been watching, because don't you normally do it that much, but I have been recently. And there's lots of stories around about how much energy is used by data centers and routers when literally billions of people are watching Netflix, Amazon Prime, BBC iPlayer, Now TV, Hulu. The list goes on and on. I mean, there's so many of them all around the world. So the impact of sending out 90 million views of Fully Charged has made me pause and reflect. And then I remember an article I saw last month from New Scientist that questions the reports about just how impactful this is. Because every time you search the internet or you stream a video, what we think of is that we're doing that in our house and we go tappy, tappy, tippy, tap, and ask a question. Say, just doing a Google search, just doing an internet search. What that does is it sends that signal to a router running on electricity in your house, which goes out to a bigger router in a nearby data center running on electricity. It's then zooshed across, probably a massive fiber optic cable to somewhere else, who knows, where there's a data farm that's running on electricity. And then the answer comes back. That's a lot of computers that are running, and they're running 24/7. And then that's just a search. That is just a search. But when you do, when you're watching streaming video, that is a lot of data coming down a pipe. Well, that has to be powered by electricity. And so I'm just quoting now from the New Scientist article. With rising internet use, there have been fears that this is driving a big increase in energy consumption, undermining efforts to limit climate change. Well, New Scientists say the good news is that according to the most detailed study to date, the energy use of data centers has risen just 6% recently, despite a 550% increase in demand. So that's how much more we're watching than normal. Things like, everyone, it's been in the news a lot, the use of Netflix and Amazon and all the streaming platforms has gone through the roof. So dramatic improvements in efficiency have almost cancelled out the big increase in use, according to the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California. So they've been studying this. Video streaming in particular has been singled out as a major driver of rising energy use, with several media outlets reporting the emissions generated by watching 30 minutes of Netflix are the same as driving almost 4 miles. They don't state in this article whether they mean driving 4 miles in an electric vehicle or a petrol or diesel car. I'm guessing the latter. So this claim is based on figures in a 2019 report by a French think tank, the Shift Project. Le Project Shift. I don't know. But anyway, according to an analysis by George Camilla at the International Energy Agency, the IEA, published by Carbon Brief on the 25th of February, errors in those figures mean emissions from viewing Netflix were overestimated by a whopping 30 to 60 times. That's what I like. I like if you're going to overestimate something, go for broke. Really pump it up massive. So I want to find out, as always with these things, who are the Shift Project, who's paying them, who runs them, where do they get their money from? Anyway, let's move on from there. So I think you can work out that you can watch Netflix, and you can certainly watch YouTube, and you can watch Fully Charged without it being a devastating impact on the world. But it is worth noting that it uses a lot of electricity, but that's it's worth having a look at that that article. There is an independent study by a man called Chris Priest at the University of Bristol, not far from me, estimated that YouTube alone generates 10 megatons of CO2 a year. That is just horrifying, isn't it? And Priest says nothing in... so the Shift project, YouTube accounts for less than a fifth of total streaming emissions. What we're seeing here, I can't be bothered to go through the details of this, but something smells a bit fishy, i.e. there was funding to, denigrate one particular streaming service, Netflix, and to benefit another one, possibly YouTube. So anyway, there's a lot of electricity. Let's leave it at that. Okay, this is slightly in reference to the thing, but I won't mention the thing. Another complication is that the rising energy use in this sector, i.e. streaming video and massive internet use, might sometimes lead to lower demand in others. For instance, demand for streaming video might shoot up this year if millions of people are forced to spend more time at home because of the thing. But if they are doing this instead of driving or flying places, overall carbon emissions will be much lower. Netflix and chill might be one of the more energy efficient things that you can do. There you go. So, because that is the thing that's become very obvious, is the cleanliness of the air. All the air monitoring in European cities, certainly, and I'm sure very soon in American cities, have shown a marked increase in air quality. Wonder why that is. Would it be because there's less fossil burning vehicles on the road? Yes. So now here is a little nugget of joy to end this super short edition of the Fully Charged Show podcast. As everyone knows, solar panels only work when it's daylight. A lot of people say they only work when it's sunny. That's not true. When it's daylight, they are working. I can verify that from all the energy I've produced on really grim, cloudy days. Not much, but some. But they only work when they don't work at night. I will accept that. At least that's what we thought. So I read a recent article on earthsky.org. I don't know how wonderful a publication that is, but it seems fairly legitimate, and it has a lot of references to peer-reviewed papers. But they have done a report about solar cells that produce electricity at night through a radiative, not radioactive, a radiative cooling mechanism. These cells are driven by radiative cooling, whereby at night they release radiative heat built up over the day and generate electricity. The research was published in a peer-reviewed journal, ACS Photonics. Now, while the prototype nighttime solar cells can only generate about a quarter of the energy produced by conventional solar cells, that's still quite a lot for when it's dark. The scientists are hoping they can improve their performance in the future through better designs. So that is extraordinary. I mean, it's kind of daft, isn't it? So the links to all these stories, I'll put them in. It's very clever, though. But anyway, that's pretty much all I've got time to record. I've got to go and plant some more carrots and cauliflower. During the lockdown, about the thing, me and the missus have been very busy in the garden. It's looking, I have to say, looking rather smart. It's a bit chilly today, but we've been doing a lot of digging this morning. But before I go, some of you may have noticed by the time you hear this that we're doing a crowdfunding investment round, which goes public today, Monday, if you're listening to this on Monday. What's the date? The 30th of March. So if you're listening on Monday the 30th of March, we have just released to the public a crowdfunding investment project. Now, I am very aware, we're all very aware at Fully Charged, that this could not have been launched at a more inappropriate moment for really, let's say, the last 150 to 200 years. You know, it is insane because there's so much else for people to worry about. But if you can raise your head from your pillow of despair and look at the long term, the big picture, because we will, I can't even bear to use the term get through this, but we will. This will be a historical moment in our lives. It's going to be incredibly damaging and very difficult to get through, but we will get through it. So we have launched this at a very, very inappropriate time, but the process of launching it was already in place long before the thing raised its extremely ugly head. And I'm very, very pleased to tell you already, the campaign has already passed the 80% mark and is growing by the minute. So people are investing. We've had some amazing cornerstone investors who have started the whole process. And that's mainly who've been investing, but we are getting a lot of investment. At the moment, up to now, it was only Patreon supporters that knew about it, but now it's gone public. So for the very few of you who might be in a position to invest in a company that is growing, and even now, in the current climate, with the thing going on, is doing quite well, well, the links to that will be in the show notes for this week's episode. So it's zero pressure to anyone, and the difference between an investment and, say, supporting Fully Charged by donating to Patreon is pretty enormous, because what you're doing is you're investing in shares in the company that makes Fully Charged, and that company is growing and increasing in market value. And it's all those things that I am uniquely and almost proudly inept at describing. But if you go to the Seeders page, we're using Seeders as the crowdfunding system which is how we're raising the money. If you go there, it is all explained by really clever, properly informed, legally wise people who know how to do these things properly. I'm not one of them, but when I take advice from them, I listen very carefully, and I've been I've done a lot of due diligence. There we go. Anyway, I don't know how long I've waffled for on my own. It shouldn't have been this long. It was meant to be quicker. Well, under 30 minutes. So I'm quite proud of that, because I know I can gab on like an idiot. So please do subscribe to this podcast. That really does make a big difference if you subscribe to us on your preferred podcast downloader, or however you do it, or on iTunes. And if you want to leave us a lovely review on iTunes, maybe this one you go, Robert just drones on like an old bucket, then yeah, you're very welcome to make that comment as well. Next week we will have some proper, incredibly exciting guests. The next few weeks are going to be, because one great thing about the thing at the moment is all these people I want to interview, that they're normally so busy, they're going all around the world, they're doing all sorts of amazing things, they're much too busy to do an interview. Suddenly they're all at home and they're very willing to do it, so that is fantastic. So I am doing a lot of interviews next week, and I will record them all and not make another boo-boo. So there we go, that's all. If you have been, thank you for listening.